The consequence of black magic. It was the year 1954. I was a young man of 24, filled with life and dreams. But destiny had something else in store for me that night. I was traveling by vessel, crossing the dark waters under a moonless sky. The air was heavy, damp, and strangely cold for that season. The river stretched endlessly into the shadows, and the only sound was the constant splash of water against the wooden body of the vessel. The lanterns flickered dimly, casting long, twisted shadows on the deck. It felt as if the darkness itself was watching us. I remember leaning against the railing, gazing into the black water. Everything seemed calm, yet there was an uneasy silence among the passengers, as if the night was holding its breath. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a figure sitting alone, away from everyone else. It was a man, perhaps in his 30s. His posture was strange, shoulders hunched, hands trembling, head buried between his knees. At first, I thought he might be sick, but when I stepped closer, my heart began to pound. His face was pale as death, his lips dry and quivering. His eyes, they were wide open, bloodshot, and full of something I can only describe as pure terror. I bent down slightly and asked, "Brother, are you all right? What happened to you?" The man slowly lifted his head. Tears streamed down his cheeks. His voice cracked as he whispered the words that still echo in my ears. "They will kill me. They will kill me." For a moment, I froze. The way he said it, it didn't sound like he was afraid of ordinary men. No, his fear was something darker, something unseen. I tried to calm him. "Who will kill you? Tell me, maybe we can help." But he only shook his head violently, his lips trembling, his eyes darting around as if invisible shadows were closing in on him. His silence was more terrifying than his words. It was as if he wanted to speak, but something, or someone, was stopping him. That was the first time I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The vessel kept moving steadily across the dark river, but deep inside, I knew this journey was about to turn into a nightmare. The man sat there, shaking his head in silence, refusing to reveal who they were. His lips trembled as though the very act of speaking would summon the terror he feared. I kept pressing him gently. "Tell me, who is after you? Who wants to kill you?" But he only stared into the darkness of the river, his breathing fast and shallow. His eyes darted back and forth, as though he could see something the rest of us could not. The other passengers were beginning to notice him, too. A few whispered among themselves, stealing nervous glances. There was something about this man, something unsettling. The air around him felt heavy, as if the shadows clung to him. Finally, after much hesitation, he spoke again, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Home. My home is in." He gave me the name of a village. "If anything happens to me, remember this place." I tried to ask him more, but he suddenly stood up, his movements restless, almost frantic. Without another word, he stumbled toward the small washroom at the back of the vessel. At first, I thought nothing of it, but only a few moments later, the air shifted. It was as though the vessel itself had entered another world. From inside that tiny washroom came a sound that no one will ever forget. It began as a low murmur, then rose into a chorus of screams, dozens, then hundreds of voices. Men, women, children, all crying, shrieking, begging for mercy. It was impossible for such voices to come from one man. The sound was so loud, so haunting, that the entire vessel shook with fear. Passengers screamed. Some covered their ears, others prayed aloud. I stood frozen, my blood turning cold. And then, it happened. A thick, dark stream of blood began to seep from beneath the washroom door. At first, just a few drops, but then it gushed, spreading across the wooden floor, glistening red under the lantern light. The smell of iron filled the air. Someone shouted, "Break the door. Something is wrong." Men rushed forward, pounding on the door, their fists echoing with panic. But from inside, the screams only grew louder, twisting into something inhuman, something that didn't belong to this world. Finally, with a loud crack, the wooden door gave way. The moment the door splintered open, a cold gust of air rushed out of the washroom, carrying with it a stench so foul, so rotten, that several passengers gagged instantly. It was not just the smell of blood, it was something far worse, something unnatural, like the scent of death, mixed with burning flesh. Inside, the lantern light flickered across the cramped washroom walls, and everyone froze. The man was gone. At first, we thought perhaps he had fainted or collapsed, but no, what lay before us was something no human mind should ever witness. On the wet, blood-soaked floor lay only fragments of his legs, mangled, torn, as though some invisible beast had devoured him alive. The rest of his body had vanished completely. Not a trace of it remained. No bones, no skin, nothing. Just the lower parts of his legs, twisted in an unnatural angle, dripping with fresh blood. One of the passengers screamed and fainted right there. Another man staggered backward, clutching his chest in shock. The women wailed, some crying out prayers, others covering their children's eyes. But what chilled me to the core was not just the bloody remains, it was the walls. On the wooden panels of the washroom, dark streaks of handprints smeared across the surface. Not just one pair, dozens, maybe hundreds. Small, large, crooked, claw-like fingers, markings that seemed burned into the wood itself. They looked as though countless unseen hands had pressed against the walls, all at once, clawing, scratching, begging to escape. The sound had stopped now. The screams of hundreds of voices were gone. The silence that followed was far worse. It was heavy, suffocating, like standing inside a tomb. We all stood frozen in horror. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. The thought that only moments ago, a living man had walked into this room, and now only pieces of him remained, it was beyond comprehension. One of the elders on board whispered tremblingly, "This is not the work of man. This is something else, something unholy." And deep inside, I knew he was right. Something unseen, something ancient, had been with us, and it had taken its victim in the most terrifying way imaginable. The vessel finally reached its destination, but the passengers were still haunted by the nightmare they had witnessed. No one could speak of it without trembling. Many swore they would never set foot on that vessel again. But I could not let it go. The man had given me his home address before he disappeared into that cursed washroom. Something inside me needed to know the truth. Who was he? What had really happened to him? So, with the help of two other men from the vessel, I carried what little remained of him, those broken fragments of his legs wrapped in cloth, and made the journey to his village. The entire time, I could not stop replaying the sound of those screams in my mind. Hundreds of voices, yet only one man had gone inside. When we finally reached his home, the villagers gathered around, shocked and horrified. They recognized the remains immediately. Mothers covered their children's eyes, while the elders shook their heads knowingly, whispering among themselves. At last, one of the oldest men in the village spoke. His face was lined with age, but his eyes carried a knowledge that chilled me to the bone. He was warned many times, but he would not listen. He practiced black magic. He was not just dabbling in small rituals, he was walking a path of dangerous sorcery. He wanted power. He wanted to control forces that no human should ever attempt to control. The old man's voice grew heavier. He was attempting a ritual, something forbidden, a summoning, but he failed. And when you fail to control the darkness controls you. What happened on that vessel was no accident. It was his punishment. The very spirits he tried to enslave tore him apart. The villagers nodded in agreement. Some even spat on the ground, calling him cursed. They said that for weeks he had been seen wandering at night, chanting, leaving strange offerings by the river. And on the night of his journey, he had set out to complete the final step of his ritual, but he never succeeded. Instead, he was dragged into the very abyss he had awakened. I stood there, speechless, clutching the cloth in my hands. For the first time, I realized the true horror. His death had not been random. It had been waiting for him. The villagers buried what was left of him in silence, without prayers, without rituals. For them, he was already lost, claimed by the dark powers he had once worshipped. That night, as I walked away from his home, the elder's words echoed in my mind. Those who call upon the shadows must be ready to be swallowed by them. No one escapes the consequence of black magic. And even now, after so many years, I still hear those screams in my dreams. The screams of hundreds, trapped inside one doomed man's fate. Did you enjoy the story? Let us know in the comments. And if you liked it, Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Horror Dream. Want more stories like this? Subscribe to The Horror Dream, and we'll bring you more darkness, just for you. If you enjoy a little chill down your spine, stick around, like, share, and hit that subscribe button, right here on The Horror Dream. Your support keeps us going, so stay with us. Subscribe to The Horror Dream for more spine-tingling tales.